I'm about to do moss stitch in the round. I've cast on all the stitches I need, and I did that by putting an elastic on this end of the needle so that none of the stitches would come off there. And I've helped myself along because I need a lot of stitches, so every section of 10 stitches I put these little markers just so that if I lose track of how many stitches I've got, I can just count in 10, so it's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 and so forth. I'll take those off as I continue knitting this moss stitch around. So here I go. I'm just going to join the round, and I'm going to be doing a knit one, purl one moss stitch. There's two types of moss stitch that I'm going to discuss. There's the knit one, purl one, and there's a knit two, purl two. I'll start with the knit one, purl one. So to join the cast on, I'm just going to put a row marker in a contrast colour. It's going to be this magenta wool here. You can use one of this type of row markers or just a contrasting colour of wool, it's up to you. So I'm using this because I've used those in the sections of 10. So pop it on, there's my row marker, and join the round. Everything's facing in, all facing in so that nothing's twisted. And I pick up the working yarn and the tail and just knit into that first stitch with both. So this is the knit one, purl one moss stitch. I let go of the tail after that and just work along then with the working yarn. So I've got my knit one and my purl one. It's a little tight to start off when you've just cast on, and knit one, purl one. So when I get back around to my last stitch, I did an even number of stitches, so my last stitch is going to be a purl one. Knit one, purl one, knit one, purl one. I'll see you back around there. Knit, purl, knit, purl. So I'm back to the beginning, and the knit, purl is just sections of 2 stitches, one knit, one purl, and then you're back to a knit. So I've ended on a purl, but with moss stitch we go to the opposite now. I start with a purl. Last time I started with a knit, this time I start with a purl. A moss stitch just works in, well, the two types that I'm discussing work in 2 rows. So my first stitch is going to be a purl and then a knit. So purl, and with this particular cast on I did include the tail there, so I've made sure to include that in that first stitch, and a knit. So whereas row 1 I started knit, purl, and then went knit, purl again, now I'm going purl, knit, and purl, knit, all of the way around to the end. And so unlike a 1x1 ribbing, you've got the opposite. You've got a knit stitch followed by a purl stitch in the next row, and then row 3 will be the opposite again. So that's when you're doing the 1x1 moss stitch. But there is another one I wanted to discuss, and it's the 2 knits and 2 purls. And when you're going in the round, you always go, if you're reading a pattern, in the round, you go from the right side to the left side because you're sort of coming around like this with your work. So it's knit 2, purl 2. So we're in sections of 4 for this one, whereas we've just been in sections of 2, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1. This moss stitch here uses sections of 4, knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, purl 2. So the amount of stitches you're going to need on your needle has to be in the 4 times table for you to get back to another knit stitch from your first knitted stitch. It has to be, it's 4 stitches later for the next section of 4 in that particular moss stitch, whereas the one I'm discussing is only in 2s. To get back to another knit stitch, we do a purl, then we're back again to another knit stitch, so we're in the 2 times table. So any number of even stitches for knitting in the round for this moss stitch I'm doing. For this other one, if it's knit 2, purl 2, and then in the next row up would be purl 2, knit 2, the opposite, you would be in the 4 times table, i.e. what a pattern comes in a section of 4 like that. So back to this, I've started on a purl, then a knit, a purl, then a knit, and now I'm back to a purl, and this is row 2. So I'll see you at the end of row 2 and I'll explain what happens. So here I am, arriving back, knit at the round marker, purl, knit, and that was round 2, and there's just those 2 rounds that form the moss stitch. So here I have a pre-prepared hat that's got a moss stitch rim, and that's a 1 by 1. So knit 1, purl 1 for the first round, and purl 1, knit 1 for the second round. And it's an adult hat, and knitted in a double knit wool, which is an 8 ply, and I've got 114 stitches on that if you're interested. But if I was using a 2 by 2, so knit 2, purl 2, and then on row 2 purl 2, knit 2, I'd have to go to the 4 times table, so I would have had to put 116 stitches on, or 112 for that to work out. So I've got on this particular one actually 8 rows of the moss stitch, and then just 3 rows here of regular knitted stitch. And before I went on to the next colour, but you can do like a whole plain hat, just a knitted hat, or whatever pattern you like. So that's moss stitch in the round, and a few other little extra tips. Normally I don't use the long tail cast on for hats. I use the tubular cast on, and it's a stretchier cast on, because you saw at the beginning that's pretty reasonably tight, that long tail cast on, but it's a personal preference. But I will put a link down below the video to the tubular cast on video that I have done. Okay, enjoy, bye.